everybody. I'm excited that we are now in the third week of this series. We have one more to go, and we have quickly sort of traversed all the terrain that we needed to get through. Starting off with our story of courage, which everybody who was here should remember the story of courage that we looked over. I do want to quickly, before we jump into what we're going to do today, just kind of re-explain why we're looking at all these things. There are amazing stories of a lot of Christians who've come before us, and that's wonderful and awesome to look at. And we can look through all the details and go, isn't that amazing and remarkable that that actually happened in real life? And the thing is, if we leave it there and don't apply it to our lives, then it's just a story. It's just us coming together, enjoying a story, and having a good time. But the point of these stories is to show you the highest ideal of something that can be applied to your personal life. We look at the stories of Athanasius and the amazing courage that he shows as a Christian, which can be applied into our own lives, because there's times that we're called to have courage in our faith. In many different places. I mean, goodness, it takes courage just to walk up to the person in the grocery store and to share your faith with them. I can prove that it takes courage because most of us don't do it because we're scared of what it's going to be. Oh no, I'm going to be a weirdo, that people are going to think that I'm just a holy rolling Jesus freak, and I don't want anything to do with that. But that takes confidence. That takes courage. It takes courage to proclaim things about your Christian faith that the rest of the world sees as maybe not politically correct right now. That's a form of courage. We can take confidence from stories that have come before us of people who experienced much worse conditions than we are experiencing right now, see the courage that they exemplified, and take from that into our own Christian life. That's the purpose of this, to hear stories that would develop us into the people that we need to be, even for our own church and our own community, having confidence in proclaiming the name of Jesus. Then we look at the story of Jim Elliot that we looked at this last Wednesday, and the amazing sacrifice where he took his entire life and devoted it to God in all aspects, where he would not only devote it in just the way that he would live, but also unto death he gives his life to be a living sacrifice, and to show us the meaning of those words. And when we see the sacrifice that some people have made, suddenly it becomes easier for us to make the sacrifices we need to make in our own life, that God calls us to make through our time in prayer, through giving of our own resources to sacrifice to God for the purpose of our own community. Hello, somebody's phone is ringing. You want me to go take it for you? I'm kidding. Come on, guys, lighten up. Everybody, you can laugh at that. Through our own personal giving, through our own giving of our time to God. That's why we look at these stories. So, we've looked at the first two. We've looked at Athanasius. We've looked at Jim Elliot. And now we're moving on, which you should be able to see up there. Move back. Thank you, man. To our story of overcoming. Casey was a little bit quick on the draw on that. Remember, that's right. I tricked you. I'm going to make a bigger gesture when I want that. All right, as we look to our story of overcoming today. Before we get into this, I'm not going to look just straight at it, but I do want to talk about just what that word really means. What is overcoming? Okay, we've heard it a lot. It's certainly used a lot as kind of a buzzword in Christianity today. I'm overcoming. This is overcoming. What does it mean to overcome something? Anyone? Hands raised. What is overcoming? To conquer? To beat it? Exactly. What I like to think about with overcoming is when things fall into our lives, things that we did not plan or anticipate. Imagine like a wave coming. How many people like the beach? Anybody? Because I love it. I thoroughly love the beach. It's my favorite place in the world. Give me a choice of the beach or the mountains, I'm choosing the beach every single time. I love it. And by the way, the colder the better. I love freezing cold water. I was born in water. My mom birthed me into a birthing pool, and ever since then, I have always loved the water. I like it when it's cold because that means there's not a lot of people out there that are bugging me. I can just get right into the water and enjoy it. I love standing out in the waves, and I love the waves coming back and hitting me. It's one of my favorite things. But when it gets a little later on into the night, 5 or 6 o'clock or so, you'll know that as the tide starts to come in, the waves start to get bigger and bigger. Those waves that were breaking earlier suddenly are a lot bigger than they ever have been. And even if I want to sit here and try and overcome the wave that's coming at me, it's far more superior than I am. It's going to knock me down every single time. See, that's what waves can do. Now, I can't overcome it by going over that wave. The wave's too big. I can't jump over it. I can't stand there. How do you overcome a wave that's coming at you? Does anyone know? Does anyone know the trick to it? You can ride it. Now, some people say if you flip yourself and you just kind of ride with the wave, that'll help. But at the same time, that wave's going in all different kinds of directions. See, if you narrow yourself out, you're going to go for a little while, and then you're going to hit something. The wave kind of turns, and it kind of puts you on your side, and then what happens? Then you get caught in what we call the undertow. Then you're in the undertow. Do you know how you can overcome a wave that's coming at you? I learned it many, many times, getting caught in the undertow until I finally figured it out. When that wave breaks and it starts to come at you, you don't go over it, you don't turn around. You know what you do? Go under it. You go under it. As the wave breaks, guess what? Underneath it, there's no wave coming at you. The breaking wave is at the top of the water. You can dive underneath it, and you can feel the wave come over you. See, that's the strange thing about Christian overcoming. Overcoming always is seen as, I'm going to go over it. Well, sometimes a Christian overcomes in ways that the world looks at us and says, how is that any form of overcoming? But it's trusting in God. It's putting your confidence and faith in God and doing things unexpectedly, and you can go under it. See, we all have storms that come into our lives, things that we are called to overcome. I don't know what those are, but everybody knows about them. Loved ones end up dying sometimes. Didn't want it to happen, but it happened. Relationships break up. They always do. Things you did not anticipate, you didn't try you didn't do anything, but it still falls on you. It's a storm that has come into your life. And at that time, it really makes you contemplate who you are and who God is, because as good Christians, right, we always want to parody what Job said at the beginning of the book of Job, right? When all the terrible things happened to Job, we all know that, what happened to Job. He lost his family, he lost all of his wealth, really loses everything in the course of like 1 or 2 minutes. And what does Job say? He says, well, the Lord gave, the Lord takes away, blessed be the name of the Lord. Then chapter 2 falls and he loses his health on top of that. Suddenly, he's lost everything. He's covered in boils and sores. And if you want to read the Job narrative, you'll realize 20 chapters down the road, Job is no longer saying things like, the Lord gave, the Lord takes away, blessed be the name of the Lord. Instead, he's saying, the Lord crushes me like an ant, unfairly. He doesn't give me any chance to respond. What sin did I possibly commit that would let you be able to do this to me, God? And he starts to look at God, and his tone has significantly changed. That's what a lot of Christians can be like. See, it's easy to hold on to the hand of God and to talk about the mercies and goodness of God when you're not going through anything. When you start to go through things, you know what we call it? We call it a fair weather friend, by the way. I can worship God and praise his name until something bad happens to me. And then we start to think to ourselves, God is all powerful, right? He controls everything. He has his hand on all things, so how come he can't intervene here? How come he's not reaching his hand out and helping me in this time? How come he allowed this circumstance to come into my life? When I think about that, I think about what I consider to be a really good song that I heard once by Tennille Townes. And it painted a picture and a story. It went like this. The verse said, there's a jersey on the wall in a high school gym in my hometown. In the corner by the scoreboard where the bleacher seats fold down. 27 took the Tigers to the finals that year. Oh, but that's not why it's hanging there. Says, if I ever get to heaven, I've got a long list of questions. Like, how do you make a snowflake? God, are you angry when the earth quakes? How does the sky change in a minute? How can you keep this big rock spinning? And most importantly, why can't you keep a car from crashing? Forgive me, I'm just asking. See, bad things happen in our lives. Times of testing. And you've got 1 or 2 options. You can reach out your hand, and you can take the hand of God, and you can overcome, or you can be overcome. Those are the only options. You can either be overcome by the ills that fall on your life, or you can overcome them. And that's what we're going to look at today. So let me set the stage for our story. In the 18th century, there was a very simple and common family. Not rich. They didn't have any fine clothes. Their house didn't look in any way like it was different than anyone else's. Bit of a poor, common, salt-of-the-earth family. It wasn't uncommon in those times. A family of the Merricks. And one night, the mother, Mary Jane, brought forth into the world a beautiful and perfect baby boy. And she loved that young boy. And she gave him a very common and simple name, Joseph. Called him Joseph Merrick. And Joseph grew up. As he got to 1 year old, as babies often do, he'd be in the night, he'd cry, and his mother would always go and find him and cradle him and make him feel better. Every baby cries in the night. It wasn't uncommon. But Mary Jane started to realize that young Joseph is crying a whole lot more than other babies do. She couldn't understand it, but he just seemed like he was in constant pain, but didn't know what to do with him. As he grew up and got to 2.5 years old, and those joyous moments of a young child trying to take his first steps, he's trying to walk, and everybody has seen a young baby as they're trying to make their first steps, and it's a very clumsy affair, right? They don't have it all put together. They're just kind of walking, and then they fall over, but they're learning, right? They're learning what the process is to properly walk, so it kind of looks like he's just sort of limping around the room. But it doesn't get any better. See, at 3-4 years old, the limp isn't going away. This is just the way that he walks. And his pain seems to increase. Finally, he can start talking to his mother. At around 5 years old, they start to notice there's little growths that are starting to pop up on him. It's not uncommon for that to happen at that time. I mean, warts, moles, all that kind of stuff. It's not like there was any form of great care, to do anything about that. People's skin was just a little more naturally leathery, so no real cause for concern until the growths wouldn't stop. And they got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger month after month, until finally the perfect image of this boy Joseph was now completely warped. At around 7 years old, he looked significantly different than any of the people next to him. He could see the kids as they were playing out in the yard, and he would try and limp his way over to them. He couldn't realize or really understand why all the kids were running away from him. And the ones that stayed would mock him. And it just didn't make any sense to him until he realized it's the way that he looks. It's the way that he can't walk like everybody else can. He would come crying home to his mother, Mary Jane, and she would cradle him in her arms, and she'd say, "It's all right, Joseph. See, because I love you, and God loves you. Doesn't matter what they say. See, I don't know what's wrong with you, but I love you." And that becomes his one real solace in life, is that his mother loves him, even though his condition continues to get worse and worse and worse. But even that would be taken away from him, because at 7 years old, his mother, Mary Jane, would come down with pneumonia. And soon she would pass from that world, leaving only his siblings and his very abusive father. And his father would really take it out on Joseph, the youngest of them, because Joseph looked a lot different than all the other kids when he'd come home drunk. Soon his father married another woman who was not kind either. Finally, they kicked Joseph out of the home. Said, you, whatever condition you have, whatever thing you have, it's grotesque, you little creature, get out of our home. And they kicked him out. And there he went, all abandoned, to go live with his uncle Charles. He would live with Charles till he was 17 years old. By the time he grew to 17 years old, the human skull and head, by the way, is around 7 pounds. Every normal skull is. At around 17 years old, Joseph's head weighed somewhere around 13 pounds. That was the amount of growths that had taken place on his face, the growths that had taken place on his back, and the growths that were starting all over his body were crippling his spine, to where not only was he living in chronic pain his entire life, but there was nowhere he could go where there wouldn't be people who would either laugh or mock or turn their faces away at the grotesque and hideous creature who was walking down the street. At 17 years old, he went to the only place in society that would accept him, and that was the workhouses of London. There, where he would take a pickaxe and start to swing it. That was the only way he could make any form of affordable finance and money so that he could feed himself. And yet, even that didn't work out so well, because as his condition got worse and worse and worse and the pain got worse, he just couldn't swing those pickaxes anymore. And he was back on the street again with nothing. Until he found what he thought maybe is the only solution for a person like him. And he saw the signs everywhere. The circus isn't in town now. The circus is coming to London. And he found his way to the circus and to the ringleader, and he said, I don't have anything. I've never had anything. Can you use me anywhere? Can you just help me out? Can you give me some kind of job so that I can feed myself? And the ringleader knew that he had an attraction on his hands. And suddenly, Merrick's life would change very dramatically. And he would go by a much different name that the world would start to know him by as the posters went all over London. Come and see the man that God himself has forsaken. Come see the creature that we don't even know what it is, the mixture between man and monster. Come and see the Elephant Man. By that name, some people may know the story that we're talking about. And his life would change significantly, because now it would look like this. It would look like him crawling up into a cage every night with the curtains up. And prospective people who had paid their money to see this attraction, see what he looked like. And they would all gather around, and the curtain would go up. And the ringleader would say such things like, "You won't believe what you're about to see. Some of you may hide your faces at what you're about to see. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you the Elephant Man." And the curtains would fall, and there he would stand. And the women would hide their faces at how grotesque his appearance was. The men would look on and marvel at what this thing really was, as the children would mock and laugh. And it wasn't new. It had happened his entire life. This time, at least, he was getting paid for what people were saying to him. Day after day, night after night. And by the way, as we start to hear about this, I hear a lot of people, when they hear about this story, say things like, how could those people do those things? How could somebody pay to see another human being as a human attraction and mock and laugh and dehumanize people like that? Certainly in 150, 170 years, we've significantly changed our society. People wouldn't do things like that. And it always brings me back to a video that I was watching on Facebook one day. And I was watching, it was an interesting title. It said, "A Down syndrome man speaks to Congress." So I clicked on it. I mean, I know many different Down syndrome people throughout my life, so I clicked on it to see what this was all about. And I was amazed at what was taking place. This articulate, seemed like he was 50 or so year old man with Down syndrome, was talking to the halls of Congress, and he was cracking jokes. And everybody was laughing, and he was talking about how I've been to the White House twice in my life. I've spoken before all these different foreign dignitaries and American celebrities. And I'm the spokesman for the Quincy Jones Down Syndrome Foundation. And he's just listing off these incredible achievements of a life that is well lived. And then he starts to talk about all of the things that Down syndrome people contribute to the world. He starts to say things like, I don't know if you know this, but medicine, the medical world, has been sufficiently benefited by the extra chromosome that Down syndrome people have. Through the ability to do testing and stuff, we actually are on the cusp of breakthroughs in medical science. Scientific research is increased because of us. Then he says, and the happiness statistics, if you didn't know this, he says Down syndrome people are happy at a clip 3 times more than normal people are. And not only that, he says people who know a Down syndrome person, and that person is in their life, they are happy at a clip 20% more than people who don't. And I started to think, this is where the society has needed to get to, right? Where people who look different than us, You know, we can celebrate in the achievements that everybody has. Isn't this wonderful? We've significantly progressed past the days of Joseph Merrick until I realized why he was sitting there talking to the people in Congress. Because then he moved and he said something like this. He said, and you know, in Switzerland and Sweden and in Denmark, they now boast that their Down syndrome rate is basically 0%. They boast about it like it's some sort of cure that they've found. They're curing these people. And he says, you know what's happening? What's happening is that mothers who fully intended to have their children, once they see the ultrasound, realize it's going to be a Down syndrome child, they say, I don't think I want to have that. And the doctors encourage it. The doctors say, you don't want to bring that person into the world. That person's quality of life is not going to be good. It would be tragic to let that person live. And then the man has to sit there addressing the halls of Congress and looking at their face and say, I just want to let you know my life is worth living. I have a good quality of life, and people like me have a good quality of life, and I'm starting to be struck by this feeling to see that we haven't progressed anywhere beyond what people were 200 years ago. We're just a lot more polite about it than they used to be. We no longer look at people and mock them in the streets. No, we just decide who gets to live and who gets to die based on how we don't like them. They don't look like me. I don't think that your quality of life would be worth living. And that was Merrick's life. He was a circus freak at a freak show. One day, a doctor named Dr. Treves was seeing the posters all around England about the Elephant Man, and he thought to himself, I need to go and see this for myself. And he did. He walked in, paid his money, and he saw Merrick sitting there, and you know what he thought to himself? That is a medical marvel. I don't even know what this thing is, but I've got to test it. Didn't really think about the human underneath it, but he thought to himself, there's got to be something here that I can test, for further medical science. So he made a deal with a ringleader. He brought Merrick to his hospital, and they started to test him. But then Dr. Treves was completely overcome by something. That was the person, the creature he was standing in front of, could speak with him perfectly intelligently. Say, hey, how was your day? Hey, let me tell you about my day. Let me tell you about my mother, my loving mother who died at 7 years old. And they start to talk about books that they've read. And they start to talk over poetry that they've read. And suddenly he realizes that this person is a completely intelligent man who lives a full and active life. It overcomes him. And he says to Merrick, he says, look, if you ever come to a place where you need anything, let me know. Here's my card. Seek me out if you ever need me. And then that relationship somewhat ends as Merrick goes back to the circus and goes all throughout the European countryside, and they continue to present him in front of people as a spectacle. And really his one desire and hope in the world is that at a certain point he'll make enough money where he can depart society forever. No one will ever be able to mock him again. He'll have enough money. He'll just live and retire in some cabin somewhere. And that's what he achieves. So every night that's the comfort that he takes as people will look on and laugh at him. Unfortunately for him, that's not going to be the case, because as he accumulates more money, the ringleader that he was with, surprise, surprise, was not an honest man and decided to rob Mr. Merrick of all the money that he had made. Not only did he do that, he kicked him out of the circus, left him abandoned in Brussels. Suddenly, every single thing in this person's life, no matter what Joseph did, it got worse and worse and worse, to where he would display himself in front of other people and make nothing for it and start out exactly where he ended up. By some miracle, he found his way onto a train and found his way back to London, to the hospital of Dr. Treves, where he would knock on the door, and there, who opened the door, was Frederick Treves. He said, well, you said I could come back if I needed anything. I certainly need something now. And there, Merrick would stay at the hospital with Treves. Until the hospital people looked at him and said, look, Dr. Treves, this person is incurable. Whatever he has, we don't know what it is. This is beyond any of our medical understanding. We're not an infirmary, all right? We can't keep someone on forever. So you need to take him, put him somewhere else. Take him to the infirmaries. The problem is, the infirmaries were run by very rich people. That's where the rich people would put their sick people in. Well, Mr. Merrick was not a rich person. They say in 3 days, he's going to have to leave this hospital. There's no place for him to go. Go back to the streets, that's about it. die on the streets. You can't work anymore. Circus won't take you. And in desperation, Dr. Treves says, would you mind, Joseph, if I took a picture of you? That's the picture we have right there, one of the only ones we have. Would you mind if I took a picture of you and just put it into the local newspaper and ask, what can we do? I don't know what to do. I'm at the end of my rope. Just ask the people of London. To Merrick, it wasn't that big of a deal because they're already laughing at me. They can laugh at me in the newspaper. So he sent out the ad, and he told the story of Joseph Merrick, all that he had gone through, and just asked the people of London, what can we do for him? The next day, Dr. Treves went down to the hospital mailbox, and there he found hundreds upon hundreds of letters. And as he opened them up, there it was, 3 pounds from this person, 6 pounds from that person, 10 pounds from that person, with letters that said, we'll tell you what you have to do. Keep him at the hospital. Don't let him leave that hospital. That is the place for him. We will pay for that. And suddenly, thousands upon thousands of dollars are collected. The one place of human kindness really he'd ever experience. And the hospital said, fine, he can stay with us. They created a special room for him that he would live out his days in that hospital, isolated from people, living his life to the fullness. It said that he was a prolific artist. He loved to put together a little model paper with paper scraps. He put together model cathedrals. Apparently, he'd do them brilliantly beautiful. We don't have any images of them today, but even with his enlarged hand, he would sit there and work on them. He would write letters, and he would write poetry, all sorts of things. I don't know how he did it, but apparently he was able to do a lot of it. A lot of it has been lost to time. And Merrick's one real dream that he talked to Dr. Treves about, and Dr. Treves put it down in his diary, was he said, I'm so happy what everybody has done for me. That's great. But there were all these really rich people who would come in and see Mr. Merrick because his picture had been all in the paper. So he was something of still an oddity. So the rich elites, the princes and the kings and the queens would come by and see him. And they would be nice, they would be respectful and polite. They certainly weren't like the people who were looking at him at a circus, but he noticed every time they'd walk in, at the first look, their eyes would kind of overt, and then they would try and be polite about it. And he realized, no matter what I do, people aren't going to see me as a person. He said, really, my dream in life is that I could get healed up, get out of here, and then I could go to a school for the blind, because they would treat me like a real person. They wouldn't be able to see me. His life was that life that was kind of cultivated by being born in the wrong time to the wrong group of people, we could say. But he always wanted to be normal. One of his big dreams in life was, very simply, that I could just lay down like any normal man could. We take that for granted. The way he had to sleep was because of his enlarged head. He would sleep with his knees propped up. He would put his head on his knees. It wasn't a comfortable position to sleep in, but it was the only position he could sleep in. He was afraid because of the enlarged head, it wouldn't be able to go back. But he always wanted to. He always just wanted to act normal like everybody else. And one morning, Dr. Treves was going through that hospital, making his rounds like he always did. Then he came to Mr. Merrick's room, which he would always spend some time in, and they would have tea together, and he knocked on the door and said, Mr. Merrick? Mr. Merrick? Joseph, can I come in? No response back, but he opened the door, and there he saw Joseph Merrick was laying on his bed just like any other man was. Kind of a smile came to his face as he saw it. He was able to do it, wasn't he? The one thing that he always wanted to do. But as he walked a little closer, that smile disappeared because he realized that Joseph wasn't breathing. See, in his desire to lay back like any other man, what happened was his fear of his enlarged head dislocated his neck. And he died that night of asphyxiation. And then he went on to the next life. Now, I know what you're probably thinking, and it's a good question to ask right here. How in the world is that a story of overcoming? Really good question. No, you've told us a sad story for sure, a bit of an interesting story, but there's no overcoming in that. Every single spot in this person's life was tragic. Everything you told us about. The one person who loved him, his mother, died at 7 years old. He was kicked out of his house. He was abused by his father. He went to a workhouse. He lived in chronic pain to the point where he was displayed as a human creature so people could mock and laugh at him, even to the very end of his life, where all he wanted was just to act normal, like any other specific man would act normal, and lay down. And in that wanting to conform to everyone else, that would be his downfall. And he would die tragically of asphyxiation. Where in the world is there overcoming in that story? And I'll tell you where there's overcoming in that story. The overcoming came right here. Because from Merrick's life to the very end of it, from his birth to the end, listening to the things that his mother told him about a God who loved him. Do you know, throughout that entire process, and this is something that Hollywood and every other place that has told this story never gets right, Merrick was a committed Christian, always, through everything. He believed that God made him and loved him, even to the point where he was on display in front of people for their own amusement. You know what he was very fond of saying in those times? The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. My cup runs over. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod, thy staff, they comfort me. Thou hast prepared a table in the presence of my enemies. Surely goodness and mercy will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. You want to talk about overcoming? When someone is dealt every problem you can be dealt, when someone is dealt the worst hand you could possibly play, in spite of us who have tragedies befall on our lives, and sometimes that's enough to walk away from God because we've gone through a specific circumstance. And I'm not trying to downplay anybody's pain. What I'm saying is that when storms come into our lives, when storms came into his life, he was still able to say, the Lord is my shepherd, and I shall not want. Talk about overcoming, even to the very end. If he can do it, anybody can do it. Anybody can trust that the Lord has their best interest at heart, no matter what befalls them. As I said, he was a prolific writer. We don't have many of his writings, but we have one thing that survived. It was a poem that he wrote. Other than that, there's only one other piece that he wrote, which was a letter he wrote to someone, but this poem has survived. I'd like to show it to you. Be honest with you, every time I've read it, I get somewhat emotional by it, but here is the poem that Mr. Merrick wrote. It says, "'Tis true my form is something odd, but blaming me is blaming God. Could I create myself anew, I would not fail in pleasing you. If I could reach from pole to pole, or grasp the ocean with a span, I would be measured by the soul. The mind's the standard of the man." Talk about that. Hey, I know everybody's laughing at me in my life. I know what I look like doesn't look like you. But you want to come at me and blame me for that? I'm in the image of God. God created me the way that I am, and he loves me. But if I could change myself tomorrow, I'm sure all of you would treat me like a normal person. But you know what? The soul is what matters. The mind is the standard of the man. As the Bible says, man looks on the outward. God looks on the inside. And I guarantee you, everybody, and probably people who attended some form of church, because that was a big deal back in the day, and paid their money to go see this marvel of Joseph Merrick, and they looked just normal, like anybody else. They, interior, looked far more grotesque than he ever did. And interior, he was the one who looked pure to God. And he stayed faithful through it all. And dare I say it, because I don't know this for a fact, because I don't know what happens when we go to heaven. But when he passed from one life to the next, I'd like to think that he walked down the streets of heaven And that day, the crowds that formed weren't there to make fun of him. Instead, they were there to applaud a life well lived. When everything wrong could have happened, you stayed faithful to it. You could look over there and you could see the man Athanasius, our saint of courage, applauding it. You could look over there and see Jim Elliot, our saint of sacrifice, and there would join them Joseph Merrick, the saint of overcoming. Someone dealt every ill fortune that could still say, "The Lord is my shepherd, and I shall not want." If that doesn't inspire you to grab onto the hand of God no matter what befalls you, I don't know honestly what will. But God loves you like he loves all of us. That's our saint of overcoming. We have one more to do, and we'll be on our way to it. And this last Wednesday that we'll meet together, and it is as remarkable of a story as anything that has come before, I'll be honest with you, and I can't wait to tell it, on our story of redemption. And it'll be a little bit different because we'll be testing out that very famous and wonderful lyric, "The vilest offender who truly believes, that moment a pardon from Jesus receives." Do we really believe that? Is it very true that even the vilest offender can be redeemed by God? Well, if you want to figure that out, you're going to have to come back next Wednesday as we close out our series. And that is the saint of overcoming. That is the end of our lesson today.